be here today. I will be moderating a panel on generative AI for finance, investments, and banking. And I'm really excited to have with me representation of all of these areas. My name is Eleni Verteouri. I'm a senior AI product manager for UBS. I'm here on a private capacity. I'm an AI educator and advisor. Shall we start the introduction with you, Vangelis, who is joining us remotely from New York?
Hello, everyone. Hi, I'm Vangelis Pastas, and I work as a senior quantitative trader for a leading high-frequency trading firm. And I know that sounds like a lot of buzzwords in one sentence, and before I have like another 5 people leave the room, what this practically means is that me and my team, we use cutting-edge technology and large-scale machine learning to try to predict what's going to happen on the price of an asset. Think of like stocks, bonds, various kinds of derivatives over the next X amount of seconds, minutes, hours. And then we use these models plus predictions that go in the computers and the computers trade the markets. And I'm sure a lot of you have seen these movies of Wall Street traders, like back on the day, picking up the phone and buying and selling stuff. So what we're doing is we're taking the human out of the loop, and then we deploy the models that go in the computers, and then the computers trade the markets. So that's a sort of a short intro of what I've been for the past 10 years. Thank you for having me, by the way.
Fantastic. Kostas, would you go next?
Yeah, sure. My name is Kostas Kontogiannis. I'm the CFO of Skroutz, the leading marketplace in Greece. Many of you might know Skroutz as a price comparison engine, but during the last 4 years we're doing a big transformation of the business from a typical price comparison to a marketplace, meaning that we're trying to connect users to merchants. So we're tapping a lot of the user side, the user data, and all that stuff. And thank you for coming here.
Theodoros?
Good afternoon. I guess I'm the most boring organization on this panel. I'm coming from Piraeus Bank. I'm an executive general manager and I'm heading the corporate investment banking for the bank. So I'm responsible for the whole wholesale lending of the bank. We're managing a portfolio of around 21 billion. And let's say that our mission is to support the growth of the Greek economy in order to make it a bit more
Brilliant. As you saw, we have 3 very different and distinct areas of finance guaranteed to bring out different flavors of generative AI. Let's jump into my first question. We've all seen this organization achieving remarkable things, being growth for Skroutz, returns for quantitative trading firm, or impactful deals for Piraeus Bank. And I'm wondering, how will generative AI impact this growth? How can there be more synergies? Would it be an initiative that is pursued internally? Would it be a centralized approach that will be followed? Really keen to hear, starting with you, Kostas. What generative AI have in place for Skroutz?
Yeah, growth. I would say that growth is one of the most common words that we hear and discuss in Skroutz on a daily basis. It's one of our key pillars. So as I said, we're trying to connect users to merchants. So we do have a huge user database of more than 2 million active users buying through Skroutz. So how can GenAI support growth, let's say? So we do have the users, but shall we treat our users the same way all the users? No. We have to create user segmentation. We have to go through personalization. So all these tools, we do have the data, we can teach all the, we can use all this data so we can create personalization. So one is using the data, then we go to the conversion. So how we can increase the conversion, how we can make the users buy. Sometimes users, they just stay on Skroutz and they don't know what to buy. So creating the tailored solutions, offering tailored solutions to users usually increase conversion rate. And the last one is how can this support also the last step of the journey, which is the payment and the after-sales support. So all that stuff can create growth, they can create stickiness to the platform, and definitely can support our next years, the growth for our next years. What we do with GenAI today, we're, I would say, on the exploration stage, so we're on the baby steps. Definitely the management of the company and all the company promotes the use of these tools, the exploration of these tools, and we usually have a two-step approach. Like one is top-down, the other is bottom-up. So definitely our employees, our people can make use of these tools, can test these tools, can bring new ideas, but definitely in line with the strategy of the company. So it isn't that the tools and GenAI craft the strategy of the company, it's the strategy can be supported by all these tools. So I would say that first steps of exploration, see what suits to our needs, see what works for us, and then go beyond that. We're feeling happy to fail and test again and again and again. So I would say that this at now, we also monitor what our peers are doing right now, and we're taking decisions on that basis.
Fantastic. As a user of Skroutz, I'm excited. Theodore, would you like to also tell us what does it mean for your growth ambitions in Piraeus Bank?
Of course, I guess you're also a user of Piraeus Bank. Anyway, let me start by saying that today, as a bank, first of all, we have completed the foundations in digital and analytics. So almost 90% of our transactions are realized through digital channels. We have 30% more active e-banking clients during the last 3 years, and the time we need to give a new loan to our wholesale clients has been significantly reduced to less than 60 days. So we have done a lot of work. We are now in the process of building the capabilities in advanced analytics and GenAI, and actually we have been the first bank to publicly announce on our annual financial statements our strategy regarding GenAI. Let me tell you that 5 years ago, the banking sector and the listed stocks, we started reporting our ESG strategy. That was a key theme, still is a key theme, it's a reality. And all the investors were very were very curious about how we implement and we comply with the ESG. Now we see that more and more investors are actively discussing with the bank and they want to understand how we implement our GenAI strategy. So a GenAI is not a trend, it's a reality, and it's monitored by investors. As a bank, we have made a thorough exercise in all the departments. We have various departments, we have how we can use GenAI and GenAI, and we have made a list of 200 use cases across different departments: treasury, retail, corporate, wealth and asset management, HR. Out of this exercise that we are running together with external advisors, we have identified 70 use cases. 26 of them are going to be GenAI, which we are going to implement as a bank, and 4 of them are going to be implemented within 2024. Very important to say that internally we are also launching a strategic operationalization exercise to build the necessary internal capabilities as well to support this exercise. To your question, yes, we are leveraging external advisors, but also building internal capabilities. We want external advisors because we want to proceed fast. We want to use the best international expertise. We want to see what's the best practice in the foreign banks. But at the same time, it's very important to have our internal resources. We have to because this is a continuous exercise. So we want to maintain this technological tool, and we want to develop resources in order to meet future demand. What we try to achieve as a bank from GenAI tools, I think it's 3 key pillars that are going to increase the value for us. The first one is we are going to increase the revenue by higher penetration across retail and corporate. Effectively, we automate the offering and we increase the penetration. We reduce the cost of risk by strengthening our predictive analytics, and we reduce the operational cost through automation of servicing. As we have already reported, and this is public domain, out of this, in the first phase of this exercise, we estimate to have a saving around 25 to 30 million per annum. Give you an indication where our profitability is around 800 million per year, so you understand that 30 to 25 million is quite an important element for us.
Fantastic. Thank you for all the detail. And my personal opinion would be the best time to start planning for Gen AI is already yesterday. With that, Vangelis coming from a completely different area of quantitative trading, and but nevertheless growth ambitions quite high. So, would you like to also share your point of view?
Yeah, definitely. So Gen AI and all these tools, etc., have been like familiar to us for a very long time. The nature of our work is a fairly scientific, and we've been using sort of like different forms of machine learning, including neural networks, transformers, which is essentially the architecture that powers Gen AI for many years. And for us, clearly, there is only, we're in the business of making money. There is literally only, at the end of the day, one KPI that really matters. It's called revenue, which is probably true for a lot of businesses out there. And our goal is sort of to use those tools to derive new insights from whatever is happening on the market at any point in time. So foundationally, these tools are like in the core of the DNA of what we're doing. The main difference is that these models today help us do things way easier and probably much better than before. And I'm happy to sort of give like a very trivial example of what that looks. So imagine that you're trying to predict and do some sort of sentiment analysis on a stock that you really like. And there were some ways to do that in the past. Like one way would be like, oh, I would just go on Twitter. I would like inhale a bunch of tweets. I'll try to identify words with positive or negative sentiment. So positive would be, oh, good words would be great, revolutionary, whatever. And then others would be, oh, this is sad, this is not working, etc. Right? And then based on those words, I'll try to score them and try to derive some sentiment. For example, if we take the example of Google, they recently released their Gemini model, and spoiler alert for those who haven't seen it, the results were not that very great in Twitter. People bust them all over the place. So now one could use today LLMs themselves to inhale all these tweets and then sort of like perform this sentiment analysis in a way more natural way, using completely natural language, etc., and derive those insights way faster. So to us, it's going back and sort of rethinking things that we've done in the past by using a lot of human knowledge now to derive from like natural language, actual signal. Now, LLMs and Gen AI can do that in a fairly straightforward way. So yeah, that's sort of like how we think about it. It's just another tool in our tool set that we really want to explore, and it's fairly critical for our business, simply because everyone in the organization is just like very incentivized to try, because for us success is fairly correlated by trying 100 things and failing on 98 and then making 2 work really well, versus try to do 2 or 3 things well, and then ideally probably none of them is going to work. So yeah, we encourage people to really play around, toy around with this thing, let their imagination go wild.
Fantastic. Sounds like exciting times out there for all the high-frequency traders with new tools in their toolbox, new toys to try, if I may. And just to summarize, everyone is planning, trying early stages of Gen AI adoption. That being said, it would bring me to my second question. In terms of operating in highly competitive fields, I'm keen to understand how Gen AI can actually be a differentiator vis-a-vis competitors, and also complementary. Is there a risk by refusing to look into Gen AI in terms of being left behind? And Theodore, if I may, I will start with you on this one.
Thanks a lot, Eleni. You're very right that this can be a competitive advantage, and mainly for the banks which are going to implement the solution first. For us, as Piraeus Bank, let me highlight that the majority of the loans we have currently is in the corporate segment. 2 out of the 3 loans we give in Piraeus Bank are in corporate, 20 billion, as I said before. And this is the same for the Greek economy. So all the growth, credit growth, is coming from the corporate. And this is the plan for the next years. So it's really important to leverage GenAI in order to increase the penetration to our clients and improve the customer experience. And as I told you before, we have already identified specific use cases with GenAI, and let me deep dive into examples that we're currently running. The first one is the next product to buy. Effectively, what we try to do with GenAI solution here is we analyze our corporate clientele. We're talking about 9,000 clients. And we try to see what is their behavior, what is the recent transaction history, what are the products they have used in the past, what is the industry, what are the trends in the industry. And based on this analysis, we want this tool to propose specific leads, specific products that this client could potentially take. This is a major difference for us because in the past we just went to the clients and we tried to figure out what they want. Imagine you have a tool which is going to say, okay, you go to this client which is in the metallurgy sector, and because there is a lot of the price have increased, he may want a working capital facility, he does not want a long-term debt, so go focus for the specific tool. It's really great. The second one is more client data-driven insights. As I told you, we are currently servicing 9,000 clients, and we have 200 relationship managers that they have to service different customer base from metallurgy factoring to milk producer. So for us, it's very important that we want to develop a tool like a tablet. So whenever they go to their client, they have in front of them, information about what are the latest news about the sector, what are the latest news about the customer, what is the behavior of the customer, what we have seen, what we have done, and what are the products we have proposed in other customers. And based on all this material we have, this platform is going to produce specific insights. So we visit the clients and we are able to offer customized solutions. That's a big difference as well. Now, regarding the second element of your question, if we have the luxury to stay behind on this exercise and this transition, I think this is similar to what the automotive industry had to answer the debate they had 7 years ago, if they're going to migrate to battery electric vehicles or not, they're going to stay with closed combustion engines. I don't think you have the room to stay behind, because if you stay behind for 2 or 3 years, you lost the train. We see what the international banks are currently doing. We see Deutsche Bank, JP Morgan, Morgan Stanley, all of the banks are spending significant amount of resources and money for GenAI solutions. So for us, this is the route we have to follow. The key question is not whether you are going to use GenAI. The key question is in which areas you are going to focus. Are you going for wealth and asset management? Are you going to use GenAI to retail banking, corporate banking? This is a crucial exercise that each organization has to do. We have to assess the strategy of each organization. We have to see what are the strategic priorities, what are the competitive advantages, and you have to utilize the GenAI resources in the specific segments.
Fantastic. Thank you once again for the thorough response, Theodoros. Seems like the prioritization you run has come up with some very concrete and tangible examples, which I'm very looking forward to hearing more about in the future. That being said, going back to you, Vangelis, with the algorithms versus algorithm case, the pursuit of profit. Now we have all these new algorithms making accessible new data, unstructured data. So I'm wondering there, where do you see more of a competitive advantage?
Yeah, definitely. And I know what I do is fairly nuanced and probably fairly boring to a lot of people, as something that doesn't really exist in Greece. But in any case, so going back to the question, I'd like to split it in sort of like two parts. So I think all these Gen AI sort of tools is exactly what are basically just tools that developers and researchers in our industry can use to be way more efficient in their day-to-day tasks. And I think for example, for developers, like how Gen AI can be used through copilots, etc., to train in proprietary data sets or even code base. I think it's fairly understood, well understood. So I'm gonna skip for that. So I would like to give an example of how this could be useful for different kinds of researchers, right? So if we go back to the example of, like, at the end of the day, we want to generate new ideas that potentially predict different stocks quite well and whatnot. And let's say someone wants to do a deep dive, is interested in investing on the electric vehicle market and wants to do a deep dive on that. Back on the day, he would have to go take all these reports, read all these annual reports or whatever, maybe read the earnings and whatnot, like see what the analysts have written, potentially go get some data sets of what the sales data look in the US and all across the world, see what companies are doing well, etc. So that you can understand that this is a fairly consuming process, time-consuming process. It can take like weeks to process, to potentially derive like actual deep insights about what's going on in the EV market and what stock should I buy and sell based on these insights. But today one can essentially use this sort of like mini GPTs, auto GPTs or whatever. You can get, for example, like all these analyst reports. You can feed them in a GPT and ask it a bunch of questions about it. You can actually get data. OpenAI specifically has this thing where you can actually give data to ChatGPT and ask it, hey, can you summarize this information? Can you give me 10 charts about what this data is, maybe the key trends they identify, and it would actually do that for you. So now that you can understand that a quant researcher can be sort of like bionic, meaning he could flip through to 20 companies probably in a couple of days. And it's simply because the computer is doing most of the heavy lifting, and then the human is just focusing on what is good at, right? So the human is probably, hopefully, good at reasoning and evaluating this information to essentially put it in a fairly reasonable way into the model. So that's one thing that for us it's very important. So like tooling to make our developers and our researchers sort of bionic. The other thing that's also very important for us is going back to the main KPI being revenue. Is okay. We're in the business of predicting the future, and I know that sounds corny, but we want to be able to predict what's going to happen on a stock or a bond or something, on some financial asset, way better than our peers, right? So going back and having another example, you have all these companies that release their sort of like annual reports and their earnings calls and all those things. And back on the day, like today, most analysts will just take these calls, read them through, and decide and trade the stocks according to whatever these reports say. But now you can imagine a world where you can feed all this information on an LLM and then try to condense this information to predict essentially whether the prices will go up and down. So for example, if I go back 10 years and I take all Apple's earnings transcripts and earnings call transcripts and I feed them into LLM, and then the outcome, instead of being like a summary of those transcripts, is like, oh, what did the stock do the next day? What is the overnight return, right? So, and then try to derive models to see, oh, okay, like does the model, like based on what it's reading, can predict what's going to happen on the stock the next day after the earnings. And if you can start creating these models with such predictive ability, you're probably going to have a huge advantage over the guy who actually has to flip through 200 pages of an earnings report to figure out whether like he should buy, sell, or do nothing. Because the computer can simply do that in milliseconds. So yeah, and clearly earning calls and all these reports is just like simply one data set. There is a bunch of those sort of alternative data sets. There's credit card data, reviews, a bunch of other things that essentially, as you said, like a ton of unstructured or seemingly unstructured data that's unnatural language that these transformative models are actually really, really good at, deriving insights on. And I'll close very quickly by saying I love to personally interpret like GenAI, LLMs, and all this revolution of transforming technology just as another tool to sort of like extract and derive information from large amounts of data, right? So the main difference from other information retrieval methods is that back in the day we had things in like tables and database, and data was fairly structured. Today it's just natural language, right? So this basically means that for us it's just like literally instead of having a human going through all this data, like we can just remove him from the loop and then just plug him back once the model has spit out the insights, to have the human just evaluate how good the model is doing, how well the model is doing, and whether it's doing what it's supposed to do, right? And to me, it sort of reminds me, we're such in early days that it sort of reminds me of how people used Excel back in 1980s, right? So it was just like this fancy sort of table back in 1980s, and back on the day, like most accountants would just like do their financial reporting in pen and paper and a lot of manual work, and Excel was never a tool that was designed for accountants per se or consultants, but it's super obvious today that this tool is probably the most used business tool in all those like accounting firms, consulting firms, CRMs. Like people use Excel a bunch of different ways that weren't obvious in the early 1980s where the tools were developed. And Gen AI, I think, is sort of the same thing. Where like in such early stages that like just like trying a bunch of things can be a huge competitive advantage by itself.
Awesome. We heard quite a few relatable ideas in there, starting with the developer, the coding, the reading of earnings reports or any other reports or files we may have. So I think a lot of ideas are food for thought. Thanks, Vangelis, also for wearing your trader hat indeed. Certainly things we can take home. Now, that being said, Kostas, we've seen some small moves from other retail players, be it Amazon or smaller. So I'm really curious also to hear from you in the competitive landscape. What does GenAI bring to Skroutz?
The competitive landscape of Skroutz is not like the same like Piraeus, where and other banks, big banks here. For us, it's like there are different competitors. Let's say one competitor could be another marketplace, like Amazon, or a local one. Another competitor could be omni-channel stores, but another competitor is also the offline world. We're operating on the online world, but definitely there's an option on the offline world, and definitely it's also our own ambitions and our own plans and our own strategies that we're trying to beat. So we can actually lose a customer from a competitor in any step of the journey, from the discovery, the payments, the fulfillment, the after-sale. So we should focus on each and every step differently. We discussed previously about how we target our customers, how we create personalization. There are also, so we do have the customer, we're trying to serve the best option for him. He goes to checkout. We can use GenAI to lower, to get the bar higher or lower in terms of fraud detection. So we can increase our conversion rate, or if there is fraud signals, decrease it. But also, I would like to share an example. So let's say that the customer pays and places his order, and then is the fulfillment. We're also operating on the fulfillment side. We own a last mile company, and there is this real-life example. We used to have a non-Gen AI partner, which actually trying to estimate the delivery time to the consumer. It's actually notifying the consumer that your order will be here within the next couple of hours. But next couple of hours, it's a huge slot. Now we're partnering with a Gen AI partner that can reduce this slot and can provide best estimates on this side. And this is a competitive advantage, both for the online world, but also for the offline world. And this is very important, because if the consumer has a very bad experience online, we can definitely lose him, and it's very, very expensive to get him in. And okay, we're trying to do our best, but I'm sure that if you are Skroutz users, you definitely had a bad experience with us. And when things go bad, usually they go really, really bad. So then comes the customer support to keep the customer. So if you reduce the time that the bot or the agent, or at the beginning the bot, can respond to the consumer or can help the consumer go to his answer, instead of waiting 2 or 3 hours to talk to the people or to an agent, definitely get a competitive advantage as well. So I think that there are competitive advantages that you can create all over the journey. If you try all these things early enough, you can create competitive advantage against your competitors, but also you can expedite your growth, you can go better, you can decrease your cost as well. So it's both growth and bottom line P&L. Definitely, you have to be careful, because all these tools usually are very expensive, and developers, they found them sexy. So you have to, let's say, set the limits on their use, and have always a cost-benefit analysis on that side. And definitely, as a CFO, I have to think about the P&L as well. So I think that it's a massive opportunity, and can be, let's say, the holy grail of growth, if you can make a good use of that.
Brilliant. I heard very loud and clear the CFO speaking in there. We need to see the impact on the P&L. We love the tools. So let's take that away, but definitely for online businesses and for customer service, there is a whole lot GenAI can bring. And then if we stay a little bit more on accuracy, we heard all these great things we are planning to do, we are testing. There have been certain, let's say, limitations of GenAI out of the box. There has been reported a risk for so-called hallucinations. So I think for a domain like finance, that it's imperative you keep the high accuracy. I'm wondering what is already the approach that you would be taking, Vangelis, in terms of applying these models in your work?
Sure, absolutely. I think it's going back and describing a little bit like how different financial data is compared to other data sets. It's sort of the exception, not the rule. And what do I mean by that? Like, financial data have two main properties that make it very different from other data sets, because they make predictions very, very hard. So first of all, they're incredibly noisy. In most problems in life, a model would be good. It would be like probably okay, actually probably not very great, if the signal to noise ratio is 80%. So what that means is, imagine that you're like, you're using some, GenAI tool or like some neural network trying to predict like cats and dogs. Essentially, you're basically wrong. You have an 80% accuracy. So you're basically wrong, let's say 1 out of 5 times. You would say that the model is garbage, right? The cutting edge models like probably have a 95% accuracy in predicting images, or even the next word in the case of LLMs. In finance, like a world-class model would probably predict 1 to 2% signal and then 98% noise. Actually, if you do that, you will probably make billions of dollars. So the data itself is very, very, very different. The other property that's also very specific to financial data is that the distribution of the data is non-stationary. Without going super scientific to everyone in the room, it basically means that the data changes over time. So if we go sort of like back to our cats and dogs example, cats and dogs have looked roughly the same way for thousands of years, if not millions of years, right? But if you go and take financial data from the early 2000s, before the rise of computer-driven trading and all these things, the data would look completely different today. And in fact, whatever you train, like back 20 years ago, it would probably be totally irrelevant. Sort of like a good analogy to think about it is, imagine that you train an LLM in ancient Greek, and then you're trying to write a novel in English using the LLM. This probably won't work. So that means that for us, our researchers spend a significant amount of time, not just like fine-tuning these models, like these foundational models, and try to make them a little bit better. We actually go deep onto the architecture of those models and try to mitigate the effects that I just described to fit the use cases of financial data sets and how different are and nuanced versus data. And that's why, as I said, all this sort of Gen AI and broadly more like machine learning revolution is kind of like the DNA of what we're doing. And we're not just a consumer of the foundational models that come out of the big companies like OpenAI, Google, and so on and so forth. We are actually trying to be on the cutting edge of what the research looks like. Potentially even train models ourselves, or train a good chunk of the model ourselves, and so on and so forth. So I think in general, our problems are so nuanced that it requires very deep thinking and going sort of in the weeds of what Gen AI is doing and all those models are doing, versus just simply consuming, giving some input and deriving some output without putting a lot of thought on what's happening in between.
Brilliant. Sounds like, Vangelis, you are well positioned for going under the hood of these models and really tweaking things to your benefit. Now, question still remains for me in terms of how do we keep Gen AI relevant, for example, for the product offering others of Piraeus Bank. So what steps are you taking that are potentially different or same to Vangelis for ensuring accuracy and relevance?
You have to appreciate that banking is the most regulated industry in the world. We have every day we spend 50% of our day with regulators trying to review all of our operations. So when you are going to apply new technologies, which are going to imply specific decision process, you have to be very mindful how you do this. And we're also very careful about reputation and legal issues involved on this. Of course, we recognize, like any other technology, there are risks here, right? All the reports, all the product from GenAI tool can be biased, can be false, and can have material which are copy-paste and which are, there are copyright issues. So what's the solution for this? The first one is, I think, in the designing of the GenAI tool, you have to do a proper assessment about the legal reputation issues, a very thorough assessment. And the second is, I think, that you must have a human element involved in the final outcome. At least from a banking perspective, all the output which are going to be produced out of this exercise, we're going to have a human view, a human check at the end of this process to be sure that we're not losing something major. And the other thing is that, as I told you before, we have recognized 70 use cases, AI, Gen AI. I told you in 2024 we're going to do 4. Why? It's not a lack of resources, it's not a lack of funding. But we want to have a gradual process. We want to ensure that the Gen AI is going to produce the results we want, and the Gen AI, it's also a journey for the organization. In order for the organization to absorb, to feel safe, to have trust in the Gen AI tools, you have to develop a holistic framework about the Gen AI, right? You need a control framework. You need a very clear Gen AI strategy. The next Gen AI strategy should be in line with the strategy of the bank, should be in line with your ethics. You need the governors. You need an AI leadership team which is going to review the outcomes and any deficiencies we have. You need very robust and rigorous processes which are going to, how this is going to run. You need technology. And of course, you need a culture in the organization. This takes time to develop. When I say culture, all the staff, both developers and the users of AI, they should understand their role, their duties, and the limitations to the GenAI. That's really important and takes some time.
Fantastic. I really appreciate all the aspects. And Kostas, coming also to you, how do you see the mitigation of risks?
Yeah, we are a data-driven company, and I would say that almost 100% of our growth decision-making is based on data. So imagine if these data are wrong, are based on external sources that are not relevant to our needs. So I would say that the first thing is we have the data, we have the inputs, but we have to train the models and tailor the models based on our needs. And this requires time, resources. Maybe sometimes we will fail, so we have to test it on smaller projects before go to bigger projects. And definitely, we need the human expertise. Definitely, human override is very, very important. So it's not only what the model outcome is, it's the critical thinking, the expertise, and how we can influence that. So the model can act as an enabler, but definitely the decision-making is on humans. So I totally agree with Theodore that definitely you need the human input there and the human override. So I would say that we should not be afraid of trying things. We should not be afraid of failing, but definitely we should act fast. And when we fail, we should try again and test and learn. And if we cannot do it on our own, we can seek for advisors, we can seek for help. But if we don't, then we have bigger problems to solve, like the competition that we mentioned before. So I think that human still remains king. It's just about the efficiency, it's about the better decision-making, taking the best decisions, but you also have to be aware of the risks that you undertake.
Awesome. All of what I hear deeply resonates with me about human in the loop. Pilots fail early, try again, try better. And with that, I think we are closing the round of more planned content and questions. And if we still got some time, perhaps we can accommodate a question or two of the audience. Any volunteers?
Hello, thank you for your insights. The point is that all of you indicated, at least the two present in the room, that the human factor is a significant part of the whole process. This comes in contradiction to the automation you are trying to achieve and the savings. So how these can be together?
Would anyone like to go first?
As I said in my introduction, you're very right. We have a lot of automated processes, but I think that the GenAI solutions, we're talking about more complex situations, right? Where GenAI is going to be used in cases where we have a decision-making process. And this is where we need to test the GenAI. We're not talking about, let's be more specific. If it's just a code which is going to decide whether I'm going to give a consumer loan of a few thousand euros, that's an easy decision, right? And today, we have many loans in Piraeus Bank, but also other banks are provided fully electronically without any interference from human beings. The more we go to higher amounts, the more we go to more complex cases, the more you have to analyze industry trends, you have to understand the cash flows, the business plans. This is where it's becoming more complex. And this is where we have the heavier human interference currently. So what we say is we cannot go from 100% human to 0% human. We can go from 100% human to 50% human. Let's see how the GenAI can really work in a real situation, in real life, and if we are comfortable with this, maybe in a few years I'm not going to be sitting here in this chair.
Also, what I want to add is, we're not talking about going from 100 to 0, but making the best use of our human resources and our employees and improve their daily outcome, improve their work performance and all that stuff. And we are living in a world that's very, very agile and things move really, really fast. So you cannot just create a model, you just We definitely need to feed again and again with the data. We definitely need to scrape the data, clean the data before you enter the model, and definitely the outcome, because the strategy might change, should be adjusted based on the strategy. So you definitely need the people there. It's not like taking something for granted. And as we said at the beginning, we're all in the exploration stage. We cannot leave the people outside of this one. Once this is very, very well trained, then I think that the human interaction could be lower, and so we can, let's say, reallocate them somewhere else, or take some better decision making, or take any advantage of that. But I think that's never going to be 100 to 0.
I can go next. So to me, it's the question whether the human should be on the loop or not. I'm not sure it's even the right one. For me, it's about identifying what humans are good at and what computers are better. So imagine that, I'm pretty sure like most people in the audience can do like a multiplication that's like 3,564 times 423. But I would suspect that like none of them is actually doing it on paper. Everyone's taking their iPhone out and they're using the calculator to calculate that, right? Simply because doing the calculator is way faster and way easier to do that. And that's probably one of the good reasons we developed computers for, right? So, but humans are very good at interpreting what these numbers are, right? So for example, like if you do financial statements or whatever, you could actually do all the additions and all the calculations by hand. But there is a reason you use Excel, because you want to get this out of the way, this very automated thing as soon as possible, and then use the human and what it's very good at, understanding, do the financial statements make sense? Do they reconcile? How do they reconcile? What insights can I derive? So to me, it's more about identifying what computers are very good at, which is like either calculating things or summarizing from it or whatever it is, and this changes over time. Like back on the day, the only thing, in the 60s, the only thing we could do in computers is additions, multiplications, or subtractions. And today we've developed models that can actually read human text. So how computers evolve over time will dramatically change and will probably be the driver that shifts on like what humans actually focus their time on and what they're good at. So to me, that's sort of like more the right question to ask versus, are we taking the human out of the loop or in the loop, etc. I think it's more like reprioritizing where humans should spend their time better versus like spending their time on things that could be mundane and boring. And the computer simply does a way better job.
Thank you all. I feel this summarizes great the question. There is efficiency, there is effectiveness as well. Still, from the starting point we are today. But that, is there perhaps, can we afford one more question? Perfect.
Hi. A question I wanted to ask in regards to the Greek ecosystem and the overall startup ecosystem. How much of that is included in the generative AI exercises that you're doing internally? And secondly is whether you're concerned or not with utilizing technologies like, be it OpenAI, be it Amazon, be it Google, versus open source, because all these large companies are huge vendors, and they would love to have any of your organizations tied down to their products and nothing else. So are you considering open source versus one of these large enterprise-driven models, and whether in that exercise you're considering any of the local talent as a potential partner?
Okay, yeah. I think this is not a black or white question. I think it's in terms of if we're going to do open source or with a more advanced partner, it depends what we're trying to explore. On the exploration stage, we're going to work on open source. But when it comes, let's say, to the logistics, that we know the problem, we know we're trying to solve, we know that there is a solution out there that can help us, and the cost-benefit analysis goes to the benefit, then we will work with a more advanced tool from a certified partner. So I would say that we explore both, and then it depends on the capabilities of the employees, definitely. We work with all these partners, we work with AWS, we work with Google.
So we are going to explore all these parts and take our decisions. But I would say that at this stage, we haven't decided. And with regards to the Greek ecosystem and the startup ecosystem, we do have partners that are exploring the GenAI, both on the customer support area and other areas. I think that more will come in the near future, and seeing what is happening also in Europe and the startup ecosystem in Europe. Last September, I was in Lisbon, and it was the tech summit, the web summit, and the majority of discussion were around GenAI, and there are a lot of startups out there that are doing a lot of things. I think that it's going to go from, let's say, a big bang phase with a lot of startups, then to a consolidation stage, and then the best will survive. So I think that we will find good opportunities to collaborate in the near future. So I think we're still in Greece in the very, very early stage.
All right, I heard already a mixture of experts, which is actually an architecture for large language models. Anyone else who would like to comment on their strategy in terms of solution providers for GenAI?
I can give a quick. I mean, for us, as I described, everything we're doing is very, very nuanced, and in fact, extremely proprietary. There is a reason you can't really find a lot of good ideas about high-frequency trading, or even a lot of information about the companies themselves. With that in mind, we are massively less incentivized to use like big foundational models to actually perform a lot of work, and instead use our own open source, or even like our own models that we come up to achieve these tasks, simply because A, the nuance of the problem, and B, the proprietary of both the data and the techniques that we are using. And I can't really comment a lot about the Greek ecosystem. I mean, I'm an angel and investor an advisor in a few Greek startups, and I know a lot of them are trying to think deeply of how to use GenAI to solve some of the problems. I think there is a long way to go, but everyone who is feeling that is left behind, they have to be reminded that this is such early days. It's like being in, I don't know, in 1993 on the internet era, and because internet was like started like 2 years ago, that you're like, oh, I already lost the trade. No, the trade is actually start departing. You just have to be motivated to keep trying things, and no one really knows the answers yet. So it's a very exciting time to be around and trying new things and failing and trying again.
Brilliant. Theodoros, would you like to help us conclude?
I think we're quite agnostic, to be honest. As long as we get the functionality we need and the support, we have no strong preference on this.
That's it. We heard already that you have a strategy that involves external best talent. We also appreciate the secretive world of high-frequency trading. Let me be here conscious of the time. I want to thank sincerely everyone for their time and insights, and the audience for their attention and questions. I hope everyone can take something away. And we close here for today. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Take care, everyone.